started?
So sulfate and thiosulfate are going to be the two answers I'm going to give you now. Why? Because sulfate and thiosulfate are close enough, they're analogous molecules. The only difference between sulfate and thiosulfate is that one of the oxygen atoms in sulfate is replaced with a sulfur atom. So there are now 2 sulfur atoms and 3 oxygens. We'll start off by doing the Lewis structure of sulfate, which is SO4 2 minus. It's got sulfur, oxygen, and 2 extra electrons. Sulfur has 6 valence electrons. Oxygen also has 6 valence electrons. There are 4 oxygen atoms in the molecule. And then there's the 2 extra electrons for the charge. So when we add them up, it's 5 times 6, which is 30 plus 2. So 32 electrons are in sulfate. We begin by drawing sulfur in the center and the oxygen atoms on the outside. We use up the remaining electrons on the oxygen atoms. And when we draw this structure, we end up with a formal charge on sulfur of, plus 2. And each oxygen atom has a minus 1 charge. We remedy that by moving in the 2 electrons. From bonding pairs, we make them into, from lone pairs, we make them into bonding pairs. And now the modified structure has some double bond character. Now you only have 2 formal charges. The overall charge on the molecule is minus 2, and we recall that these double bonds continuously are resonating. Really what's happening is that the electrons are being delocalized all over the molecule. So the bond character is such that 6 bonds are being shared over 4 positions. So there's 1.5 bond character. They're all equivalent because the electrons are moving around very quickly. In thiosulfate, it's the same structure, except now one of these oxygen atoms has been replaced by a sulfur. So it's going to have the same number of electrons because sulfur has the same number of valence electrons as oxygen. There's still 32 electrons in thiosulfate, but now we have this structure. And again, formal charges on each one of the satellite atoms, and a formal charge of plus 2 on sulfur. Now this is kind of peculiar. We have a plus 2 charge on this sulfur and a minus 1 charge on that sulfur. So we know that's not really going to fly. So we'll move in that lone pair, and we'll move in one of these other lone pairs on the oxygen. The sulfur is going to have dibs on getting rid of the extra electron. Why? Because sulfur has a lower electronegativity than does oxygen. So it's less likely to be able to stabilize extra negative charge. So the final structure for thiosulfate is going to have 1 double bonded oxygen, 1 double bonded sulfur, and the other 2 oxygens are going to have a minus 1 formal charge. That's thiosulfate's Lewis structure.